guys at the airport. Turkey fell on it. Oh, I'm sure they're so good.
We can come.
We don't mind moving inside.
We do.
We wouldn't mind. We told them no. I told him, well, open that up. I texted him.
Yeah, it's Stevie. Trying to get back home.
He's like,
That's so funny. Yeah, now that I think about it, I've totally seen it. I don't think he wants it all.
oh, you all good?
They had to send it back.
You have a hot pot.
I know, I love it. Well, I have one just like this. Oh, is that a backer? Like it goes up? Yeah, it goes this way. No, I love that.
Well, I think keep your cards up. I'm on 25 years.
I don't know if you guys need to adjust your mics at all.
Oh yeah.
Probably. We'll just shift them up a little.
So she won't be able to do her marker board thing. She's good at explaining it. Yeah.
Plus, we'll probably just use
The geologist is good at giving like a telling us why this happened.
Right.
With
using a marker
like a
board.
marker board presentation.
Yeah,
So that's why we were in there.
We have such lovely drone footage of the actual thing that.
But she can explain why it happened.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
She'll,
I think
she'll
we
do
saw
it the
her
best
over
she
there
can.
today. Was she over there today? Yeah. That's some footage of her.
That's not working on.
Okay.
We're producing a video of her presentation that will be out at some point, so that will provide more explanation.
So we're troublemakers. We're sorry.
No, it's all right.
We're so used to doing press conferences outside.
Right.
Nowadays,
We just.
But we figured we'd only
do this winter, but.
Yeah, we thought we'd only have 10 or 15 people, so everyone's wearing masks.
Yeah, when you speak, we're far enough back so you can pull your mask off so we can see you.
I'm gonna hook onto you, Jim. Is that okay?
Oh yeah, do whatever you need. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, of course I don't have the tilt head one.
Nice podium though.
It is a nice podium. I was just appreciating that.
Is that your mic?
Already over here, yeah. I'll just
Clip it on that.
center it on that, yeah. It does not want to clip onto Jim's thing. So what's the geologist's name?
Dr. Lindsay Spiegel.
L-A-N-D-S-E-Y?
Sayspeigel.
On the left side.
He's a geologist.
Yeah, she's a senior geologist with the Maine Geological Survey.
Okay, got it.
Do you think we're waiting on anyone? We'll wait a couple minutes.
I love the NPR mic.
What's that big one there?
Limp, he said it was called.
Yeah.
I can certainly speak now.
everybody all set? Great. Good afternoon. My name is Mayor Michael Foley, and we thank you for joining us this afternoon for an update on the status of the landslide incident that occurred yesterday morning along the Presumpscot River here in the city of Westbrook. I'm joined today by Incident Commander Westbrook Fire Chief Andrew Turcott and Dr. Lindsay Spiegel, Senior Geologist with the Maine Geological Survey and also Maine's landslide expert. The incident occurred along the southerly side of the river at the rear of 161 Warren Avenue property, but encompassed multiple private properties and utilities. There were no personal injuries related to the incident. However, a number of properties sustained damage, and water flow along the Presumpscot River has experienced a significant blockage. Our first concern was the potential of flooding along the banks of the river, and under my authority as mayor, yesterday we declared a state of emergency regarding this incident. Fortunately, the waters began to find their own course through and around the blockage, and by late afternoon yesterday, the water levels upstream began to recede. Sept responded immediately by restricting water flow through their 5 dams upstream along the Presumpscot River, and the situation benefits from a dry summer season and lower than normal water levels. The National Weather Service issued a flash flood warning yesterday, which was removed by 10 p.m. last night. They have advised us that there are no major rain events forecasted for the upcoming week, which gives us favorable conditions for deciding our next steps. At this point, there is no immediate concern for flooding, and time is on our side as we assess the situation. This morning, the city convened a gathering of local and state officials and subject matter experts, including the Maine Department of Environmental Protection, state and federal emergency management agencies, local and county officials, and agencies or businesses affected. We have also been in communication with Governor Mills and the Army Corps of Engineers, which will make resources available should we need. Access to the site is difficult right now because the ground is unstable. The city's emergency team is helping to coordinate engineers and geotechnical teams to develop the best approach for cleaning the river and assuring permanent stabilization of the area impacted by this event. We are reminding members of the public to stay clear of this area due to safety concerns. Dr. Spiegel is here today to provide a brief overview of how the landslide occurred, and Chief Turcott joins us to discuss the next steps for the agencies collaborating on the emergency response. We will take questions following their presentations. Dr. Spiegel?
So landslides are a part of Maine's geological history. There are hundreds of landslides that have occurred in southern Maine since the end of the last ice age. So this is not an unusual situation, and we were very lucky that nobody was hurt. Most of the landslides in southern Maine are related to a hazardous geological layer known as the Presumpscot Formation. People know of it as Presumpscot blue or blue clay, and it's hazardous because it's what engineers call a sensitive clay, and that means that when it's left unsupported or when it's disturbed, it can liquefy and flow, which causes the landslides. So the Presumpscot Formation was present at this site where the landslide occurred. We had an area of fill over the Presumpscot Formation, and usually we have landslides in spring when it's very wet and water adds a lot of weight to slopes and destabilizes them, along with stream bank erosion. In this case, there are 3 things that could be a factor. One is the presence of the Presumpscot Formation itself. 2 is actually very low river levels, which leave the riverbanks exposed and unsupported. And the 3rd is possibly some vibrations from traffic along the properties, but that won't be able to be determined for sure until there's a geotechnical investigation of the site. So just across the river is an historical landslide site where an event took place in 1868, and there's several landslides dotting the shores of the Presumpscot River. So again, not an unusual event. These have been happening for thousands of years. Every so often we just get a reminder of their existence.
Presumpscot.
Thank you. Mayor Foley and Dr. Spiegel really gave a wonderful overview of the situation. As the mayor stated earlier, multiple stakeholders met this morning to discuss next steps and specifically related to remediation. At this point, those subject matter experts and engineers will be assessing the area in an effort to determine what is the most appropriate and safest steps moving forward. We also have engaged the Army Corps of Engineers, who will be sending geotechnical experts and a planning team up over the coming days to help us with that situation and again to determine best course of action. Yesterday, the Weather Service did issue a flood warning due to the artificial dam that had occurred. The initial concerns were related to two factors. The first was upstream flooding or pooling. We did see the river rise to 13 feet, a little over 13 feet. As Mayor Foley alluded to, those levels have dropped. They're now below 8 feet. We do not anticipate any issues whatsoever with flooding. The second concern related to downstream flooding in the event that that opened up, creating a significant surge or volume of water flowing downstream. We have been in contact with Falmouth and Portland, and we are continuing to assess this situation, but until we have further details from those subject matter experts, we have not decided or come to a conclusion on what those next steps are. Very likely, very similar to the 1868 site, we will create a channel to open that flow back up. But again, we want to get the experts in here to determine best course of action, and certainly access to the site is a concern. So we're taking very cautious steps. Time is on our side, as Mayor Foley alluded to. So that's really where we're at, and we'll open it up to any questions that you may have.
Talk about the vibration of traffic. We also heard the shaking of heavy equipment. This excavation company, we saw, the giant backhoes moving around. Are they being looked at as a possible cause of this?
It's hard.
Up to the mic.
Oh, sorry.
Did they do anything wrong?
Repeat that question for us, please. So they were asking if the shaking from heavy equipment could be the trigger of the landslide. And it could be, obviously, they have been there for many years. Running their business for many years without any problems. And it's just a confluence of these factors at the perfect time that creates that trigger for the landslide. But really, you can't say for sure until they take some test borings and see what the engineering qualities and the integrity of the material is like, and they can test it and make some better a better assessment of the situation.
My question would be, should that kind of activity be going on that close to the river?
I think if they look at the Presumpscot Formation that's present at depth in the surrounding areas, and they find out that it is just as sensitive as what was at that site, then it's probably a good idea to monitor that.
Right, but should construction activity be happening in a space like this throughout the state, no matter where it is, if there's this kind of formation, this clay, is that a protected area that should not be having construction like this?
Again, so the Presumpscot Formation is not one solid unit. It's highly variable in places. So you can't say for sure just because there's Presumpscot Formation there that it's dangerous. You have to test it. And usually with big construction projects, that's what they do. They have geotechnical engineering that will research that before the building goes into place. So yeah, it's not a succinct thing. It's variable. It can be stable in some areas and not in others.
I think the company is saying, we've been doing this for years.
Mm-hmm.
We saw what happened here. Should they continue to do that? Well, how long is this investigation going to take?
I think if they find that the area can be remediated properly, I think that's up to the engineers to answer in terms of what they find at depth as to whether or not it's safe.
That area has been filled with fill for decades. I have two questions related to fill. One is, do you know anything about its compliance with federal or state wetlands or related environmental rules, whether that fill may have all gone in before those rules were in place, or whether the city has had anything to do with any permitting for fill there. The second question is, what do you know about the composition of the fill that may have gone into the river and affected downstream ecosystems?
Well, the question about the permitting and the fill itself, that's definitely a question for the DEP. That's not something that my bureau deals with.
You said you're looking into it.
The DEP, that would be a question for the DEP. Our bureau does not handle that type of information.
Yeah, well,
Oh yes. But so for the fill this morning, the landowner said that it was all clean fill over the years. So that's what he said, right?
Yeah, there'll be some testing that will be conducted on site. So there will be testing on site. DEP will conduct multiple tests, both of the surrounding grounds and soil, as well as the water. At this point, the information that we have was that it was all clean fill. There was 90 yards of a salt sand mixture in that shed that ultimately it collapsed, but that appears to be well above the riverbank and does not appear to contribute anything to the water or water quality. So everything that we've been told thus far is that the water quality and the environment downstream is absolutely safe.
Just to add to that last question, also, if you look at the maps of the area prior to the landslide, the property operating was a significant distance from the river itself. So ultimately, based on what the doctor has shared with us, the area gave way down probably closer to the river, which ultimately caused the rest of the land to give way, which is why it created the landslide. So it's not necessarily an individual's responsibility, but it's a combination of factors that it would be very hard to determine at this moment. And like the doctor said, more studying will need to occur to actually determine the cause. But I think ultimately it's an environmental cause that's happened. It's something that's happened underground that's outside of any of our controls, any of the business owner controls. So.
I have a question for you, Mayor.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, was there one or two landslides?
The question is, was there one or two landslides? It's my understanding that there was an initial landslide that took place first thing in the morning and was observed by folks on the site and was examined shortly thereafter by city officials. And then later on in the afternoon, I believe Chief Turcotte was present for a small section of area that collapsed as part of some of the nearby sites. And being in the area at some time throughout the day yesterday, why the area is unsafe as trees continue to fall. There's actually an island of trees that has planted itself in the middle of the river with trees still standing as if that's where they grew to begin with. So as the river continues to flow through those roots, the roots will give way and potentially some of those trees and other land areas will continue to move and settle over time.
So should we classify it as a landslide or landslides?
I think the doctor could probably...
Landslide. It's what? Yeah.
It's a landslide that took place. Yep.
What's downstream of all this that is potentially at risk should the worst case scenario happen?
Like I indicated, at this point we don't believe there is any flooding risk whatsoever. The water is flowing through appropriately and managed by the Sept dams, the multiple dams upriver. So a lot of things would need to happen before there could be any potential danger. If we happen to be struck by a hurricane or something in the near future, the National Weather Service and all the officials will need to evaluate what that may look like. But there is some neighborhoods in the city of Westbrook that are downstream, and there's also some neighborhoods for both Portland and Falmouth that are further downstream as well. And the river level has lowered significantly over the years with a recent dam project that's occurred in the downtown. So it's not even at the levels that it used to be in previous years.
Looking at this in a historic context, I'm not sure who the best person is to answer this, but it sounds like for the moment, provided that scenario doesn't happen, this is a fairly ideal situation to be in terms of public safety.
Yeah, the question is this an ideal situation? And yes, it is, because timing is on our side. There doesn't appear to be any structures that are being impacted right now. There was another construction site that was occurring next to the excavation company. That construction has been halted at this point by the city until we determine the next steps. But given the fact that we have the dry conditions and no rain incoming, we can gather the teams. There's people coming from representing some of the area utilities coming from outside of the state to help evaluate the situation, and that timing is on our side.
Now, we saw some caution tape on the other side of the river around the trails. Is that part of the same closure to keep people out of the general area?
Yes, yeah. I believe there was some trail system along the river there that we've asked people to refrain from going down because it is a potentially dangerous situation.
And then, just to double check, because we weren't able to be at this yesterday, but I'm sure everybody knows. This shed was there. Is that the only structure as far as you know that was compromised?
So there was the chief referred. The question is about the structure being compromised. The chief referred to a salt shed and some equipment as part of the excavation company that has fallen into the landslide area, and then also the construction next door had some materials that had been taken through the landslide as well.
And then you talked about the core samples. Is that a specific type of equipment that's used for that drills down, or what types of things might we see over the next few days?
So the question was what types of equipment might we see there, and what types of research might be done. So geotechnical investigations usually use a drill rig to drill down into the ground and take samples of the underlying material, and then they'll test it for its integrity and engineering characteristics. So how stable it is or unstable it is, and things like that.
And is anything about this making you look at other, I don't know, potential risk spots in the state, given that the water level overall is fairly low?
Usually we're more concerned when water levels are high. Overwhelmingly spring is when landslides happen just because of water. So really, this is not a time of year that we would usually be concerned about landslides happening. I do a lot of research on landslides. We've been researching prehistoric landslides to see what factors have been cause for landslides in the past to help us look into the future. But in terms of delineating areas that are at risk, we don't have a lot of mapping done on that yet in the state.
I believe someone had said, I believe it was you, that this could in fact be a pollutant. What would characterize a pollutant?
Well, it doesn't fit the usual equation for landslides in Maine. Usually it's water, steep banks, springtime are parts of the equation, not usually dry, mostly fill banks where you don't have the Presumpscot present at the surface where you can see it. So yeah, it's just not the usual situation. So.
What's your plan with the water flow in the river? Is it to let more water out and see if it dissipates more, or you don't want to do that? You want to keep the water level low where it is?
So the question was the intent with the water level and how that's going to be essentially handled. SAPI engineers, specifically the hydro engineers, will work with other stakeholders to determine what that flow needs to be. They do need to keep a minimum flow per federal regulations, but again, they'll be working with multiple stakeholders to determine what that flow needs to be to assure that we're working in a safe manner, and anybody coming onto the site that's actually accessing that site for remediation does so safely.
You really can't get in there and do anything much with the landslide until you determine how safe it is to even get close to it, right?
That is correct.
So it's going to take, do you guys have an estimate of how long so you would be able to get to that point?
I could not say what the estimate is. The question was, what's the length of time until we get down there to start remediation? At this point, we're still assessing. We still have variable engineers and tech consultants and planners that are going to be working on this to determine the best course of action of how that site's going to be remediated.
Confirm how large of an area we're talking about specifically? I know there were early estimates of like 250 to 300 feet wide, but
so it appears to be an area about 300 feet by a little over 300 feet. We haven't completely measured it out yet. We do have folks coming on site tomorrow that will fly additional drones that can look at that topography and actually measure that site out. Correct, and then the width.
The width as well.
Yep.
And Mayor, is the state of emergency lifted, or what is the message now for the public going forward?
At this point, like I said, the question is the state of emergency lifted? The state of emergency will continue to remain in effect. We'll be evaluating under my authority. That needs to be extended by the city council if we need to. We're currently probably for the first time in history under 2 state of emergencies given the COVID pandemic. And so we will evaluate. That just allows me as mayor and department heads to mobilize whatever we need necessary to deal with the emergency. So we will be most likely considering to keep it going. But like we said, the area is unsafe. We highly suggest that people do not attempt to venture down into this area to see the damage. There's many amateur drone footage out there and photographs that you can see what's going on, and we just suggest that people do not go down there. It's very dangerous. Like I said, trees are falling. It could be a very difficult situation should someone go down there and get hurt. And access, as we said, is tough for construction equipment, let alone for public safety equipment. So we'd like people to stay out of the area. Any other questions? Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. If you have any other questions, you could contact any one of us. We will be, Dr. Spiegel did a video for us she drew out on a marker board what it looks like and what this land looks like. We will be producing a small video of that the city will hopefully have available soon, that people can fully understand how and why this landslide happened. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
the dam control is that at